Silence fell across St. Jude's church when Mama Bisi's voice cut through the wedding service. She pointed a gold-ringed finger at Dare, then at the small carved box in his hands. "Look at you!" she cried, loud enough for the elders in the front pew to hear. "An ordinary mechanic came to marry my daughter in a work jacket, and this wooden thing is the gift you brought to the altar. Are you mad?" Beside her, Chief Kola adjusted his gold-threaded agbada and laughed until the sound climbed into the rafters. "Let the pauper speak," he said. "He does not know his level. I gave your mother $14,500 when nobody else would help her. If this mechanic cannot settle what is left before this wedding continues, Amara will come with me." Amara's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Dare did not bow his head. He held the box against his chest and waited for the noise to die. "My brothers and sisters, the thing inside that box was not jewelry, and it was not a bundle of cash." Yet before the morning ended, a man who had ruled Okitipupa through fear would be unable to look the congregation in the face. Do not miss what happened next. Subscribe, and tell us your city and local time in the comments so we know where you are listening from. Now let us return to St. Jude's, where a wedding had been stopped by a debt that should never have existed. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows and broke into blue and amber patches across the floor. It was 10:30 on Tuesday morning, November 21st. Pastor Stephen stood behind the altar with his Bible open, one hand still resting on the page where he had been about to ask Dare and Amara to exchange their vows. The church was full: farmers, market women, workshop apprentices, council workers, and relatives from 3 neighboring towns. They had come to witness a marriage. Now they were watching a public trial of 2 people's dignity. Bisi stepped closer, the edge of her purple jail quivering with every movement of her head. She glanced at Dare's worn shoes and the faint grease mark near one cuff. "You repair generators beside the market and think that makes you a man worthy of my daughter," she said. "Chief Kola wears gold because he has achieved something. You came here smelling of iron filings and engine oil." Amara wiped one tear from her cheek, but she did not move away from Dare. For years, her mother had confused appearance with worth. That morning, the whole town would see how expensive that mistake had become. Chief Kola crossed the tiles with the slow confidence of a man used to seeing gates open before he knocked. 4 rings sat on his thick fingers. A silver-topped walking stick struck the floor beside each step. "Your mother signed the papers," he told Amara. Dare accepted the obligation. "Today is the final date. If he cannot settle it, I will enforce my rights against his workshop and your family land." He lowered his voice, but not enough to hide the threat. "And you will remember the arrangement your mother offered me." Amara closed her eyes for one breath. She was 24, educated, employed, and fully capable of making decisions about her own life. Still, 8 months earlier, her mother had spoken of her as though she were another asset in a failing business. To understand why Chief Kola dared to repeat that threat inside a church, one had to return to the evening of March 14th, when Bisi's hunger for status met a man who knew how to profit from shame. 8 months earlier, Bisi had not yet imagined herself standing before a congregation with her secrets exposed. She was thinking about imported lace, a newer vehicle, and the women who always seemed to have more than she did. A promoter from Lagos had promised 60% returns on a coastal property scheme. Bisi did not inspect the title, speak to a surveyor, or ask why the promised profit was so high. She transferred her savings because she wanted the result before she had done the work. Within 3 weeks, the promoter disappeared. The Ikeja office was padlocked, the telephone lines stopped connecting, and every receipt Bisi held became a reminder of her carelessness. She hid the loss from Amara and went to Chief Kola's finance office after dark on March 14th. The office sat behind a tire shop on Commercial Avenue. Kola had no visible lending license, no compliance officer, and no patience for people who asked too many questions. What he had was cash, muscle, and contracts written to frighten desperate borrowers. That night, he gave Bisi $14,500 in crisp notes. The agreement called the money a short-term commercial facility, but its real purpose was entrapment. It imposed 45% interest every month, added a daily default charge, and allowed Kola to declare himself owner of pledged property without first going to court. One clause went further. It claimed that a borrower who could not pay might provide personal labor or arrange the service of an immediate family member. Bisi saw the cash and signed without reading past the first page. By the beginning of May, the figures on Kola's handwritten statements had grown into a sum no small trader could repay. Bisi sold 2 gold bangles and 3 bundles of imported lace, making 3 payments that totaled $3,200. Kola accepted the money without reducing his invented charges. On May 3rd, he sent men to take her commercial delivery van from outside her shop. The vehicle had a market value of $9,800. There was no court order, no inventory, and no receipt. Only 4 men, a tow rope, and Kola's name spoken as a threat. Amara returned from work that morning and found cooking pots in the dust. Neighbors gathered outside the gate, and her mother sitting on the veranda with the contract in her lap. Amara worked as an administrative records officer at the local agricultural council. She had studied business administration and introductory public law at the state polytechnic. One glance at the document told her that something was badly wrong. "Mama, no lender can write himself into ownership of land and human beings," she said. "This paper is not ordinary credit. It is intimidation dressed like law." Bisi slapped the contract out of her daughter's hand. "Do not teach me about money," she shouted. "I did this so people would stop looking down on us. Chief Kola can still save this family." Pride would not allow her to admit that the man she praised had already taken more than the original loan was worth. Instead of asking Amara to help her find a lawyer, she decided to offer Kola something she believed would buy more time. That evening, Bisi went to Kola's mansion. She knelt on the polished floor and promised that Amara would marry him if the debt could not be cleared. If he did not want marriage, Bisi said, he could keep Amara in his business until he considered the account settled. Kola had watched Amara for months and resented the way she refused his gifts. He accepted the proposal, not because it was lawful, but because he believed fear would make everyone behave as though it were. News traveled quickly through Okitipupa. Before sunset the next day, one of the council drivers repeated the story at a mechanic's shed on Market Road. Dare was beneath a tractor, replacing a damaged bearing. He slid out, wiped his hands, and asked the driver to repeat every word. Dare had known Amara for years through council equipment repairs. He knew her as the woman who checked invoices twice, returned excess change, and spoke respectfully to apprentices. He also knew that her mother had never considered a man in overalls worthy of entering her sitting room. Dare did not go to the market to make noise. He telephoned Barrister Okonkwo in the district capital, explained what he had heard, and asked for a lawful way to remove Amara from immediate danger. The lawyer prepared an assumption agreement limited to the legitimate financial obligation only. It did not recognize Kola's labor clause, his claim over Amara, or any automatic right to seize property. Dare carried that paper to Bisi's house on the evening of May 8th. Dare had worked in Okitipupa for 9 years. His workshop repaired water pumps, generators, tractors, and processing machines for farming cooperatives. He wore the same blue overalls until the fabric faded at the knees, and drove an old pickup whose paint had surrendered long before its engine did. Bisi saw the clothes and vehicle and decided she knew the whole man. Whenever he repaired the community borehole, she warned people not to let his oily hands touch their chairs. When Dare entered Bisi's parlor, Amara sat on a stool with her hands locked together. Bisi was folding the few pieces of lace she had not sold. Dare placed the agreement from Barrister Okonkwo on the table. "Mama Bisi," he said, "Amara cannot be transferred to anybody. I am prepared to assume the legitimate balance while counsel challenges the rest. Your arrangement with Chief Kola ends tonight." Bisi stared at him, then laughed. "You, an ordinary mechanic who spends his life under broken tractors? You want to carry a $14,500 loan with rusted spanners? Poverty has finally confused your brain." Dare let her finish. "The paper in front of you does not buy Amara," he said. "It does not admit that Kola owns the farm. It says only that I will answer for whatever amount is lawfully established." Barrister Okonkwo prepared it. "Read it, or take it to another lawyer before you sign." Bisi did not read it. The possibility of moving the problem onto Dare was enough. She reached for a pen, but the front door opened before the nib touched the page. Chief Kola entered with 2 men behind him. His wristwatch flashed beneath the yellow bulb. "So the grease boy has come to play savior," he said. "Do you know what that woman owes me?" "I know what she received, what she has paid, and what your men removed," Dare answered. "I also know Amara is not part of the account. If you want a respondent with assets and legal representation, sign the assumption agreement." Kola read the document more carefully than Bisi had. The limitations irritated him, but Dare's workshop offered a larger target than Bisi's failing shop. He believed time, interest, and public pressure would break the mechanic long before a judge examined the clauses. "Fine," Kola said. "I will give you until November 21st. If the certified balance is not settled by 10:30 that morning, I will apply against your workshop and every asset you have pledged, and I will make sure the whole town watches you fail." The final date was nearly 7 months away. Kola chose it because Pastor Stephen had already announced the church's annual marriage blessing week, and rumors had begun that Dare cared for Amara. He wanted enough time for invented charges to grow and enough witnesses for the eventual humiliation. Kola signed. Dare added his name beneath the lawyer's limiting language. Amara watched closely. The document did not rescue her by turning her into Dare's responsibility. It removed the excuse Kola and Bisi were using to threaten her while leaving the financial dispute open to examination. Bisi took her copy and pointed toward the bedroom. "Pack your things," she told Amara. "Since this mechanic believes he knows better than everybody, let him carry you and your pride. Do not return until the debt is gone." Mama Bisi snatched the signed copy of the document, her face showing zero remorse or gratitude. She looked at Amara and waved her hand in disgust. "Pack your bags and get out of my house," Bisi barked, turning her back on her own daughter. "You brought nothing but trouble and shame to my name with your useless dignity. Go with your poor mechanic. Do not ever come back here unless you bring cash in your hands." Amara felt a deep, sharp pain in her chest, as if a knife had cut through her heart. Her own mother had cast her out like garbage on the street. She walked slowly into her small bedroom, packed her few clothes into a worn canvas bag, and zipped it tight. When she stepped back out into the parlor, Chief Kola was already walking out the gate, laughing loudly with his enforcement men. Dare picked up Amara's heavy canvas bag with one hand, his posture straight and respectful. "Let us go, Amara," Dare said softly. "The night is getting cold." Amara followed him out into the dark street, where his old pickup truck was parked under the shade of a large mango tree. The bodywork of the truck was faded and marked with light scratches, but the engine hummed smoothly as Dare turned the key in the ignition. The truck rolled slowly down Market Road, leaving Bisi's compound far behind in the dust. Amara sat quietly near the passenger window, staring out into the dark night. Her body was shaking with fear and anxiety. She wondered what kind of life awaited her at Dare's workshop. Was she going to be treated as a maid, a heavy laborer, or a prisoner of debt? Would Dare demand her labor day and night to recoup the $14,500 he had just taken on his shoulders? As if reading her thoughts, Dare kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead and spoke in a quiet, reassuring tone. "You do not need to be afraid, Amara," Dare said, his voice as gentle as the night breeze. "You are not a prisoner in my home. You are a guest who deserves total respect. Tomorrow morning we begin work, but not as master and servant. We begin as partners who will rebuild what greed destroyed." The old pickup truck bounced over the rough gravel road, its headlamps cutting two yellow paths through the damp midnight mist. They drove deep into the industrial layout on the outer edge of Okitipupa town, far away from the noisy beer parlors and the bright neon lights of Commercial Avenue. Amara kept her arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring out the side window at the passing dark silhouettes of tall mahogany trees. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She kept waiting for Dare to drop his quiet disguise, to turn to her with demanding eyes and declare his ownership over her life. In her experience, men with power or leverage always demanded their payment in flesh or pride. The truck slowed down and turned into a broad driveway, flanked by tall concrete walls, topped with security wire. Dare pulled up to a heavy double-iron gate painted in faded green primer. He stepped out into the night air, unlatched the heavy brass padlock, and pushed the left gate wing open with a slow, grinding metallic squeak. The engine idled smoothly as he drove the vehicle inside, stopping near a long, single-story brick building, set back from the main workshop bays. "Welcome to the compound," Dare said quietly as he pulled the key from the ignition. He stepped out, walked around to the passenger side, and opened the door for her before she could even touch the handle. The night air was thick, with the rich scents of damp soil, machine oil, seasoned wood, and dry corn husks from the surrounding farms. Amara stood on the hard, packed gravel, clutching her small canvas bag against her waist like a shield. All around the wide yard sat silent rows of agricultural machinery. She saw massive multi-cylinder diesel pumps, heavy hydraulic press frames, stainless steel cassava graters, and rebuilt tractor transmissions resting on thick wooden pallets. Everything was arranged in neat, precise rows, numbered with yellow paint. There were no piles of trash, no discarded engine parts rusted in the mud, and no signs of chaotic neglect. It looked less like a roadside repair shop and more like an organized equipment depot. Dare picked up her heavy luggage with one hand and held a brass key in the other. "Follow me," he said, leading her toward a quiet doorway under the zinc porch roof of the main brick house. He unlocked the solid timber door, pushed it open, and stepped aside to let her pass inside. Amara stepped over the threshold, expecting to find a dark, dusty storage room filled with broken tires and forgotten cobwebs. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. The room was immaculate. A clean, white solar lantern mounted on the wall flooded the space with warm, steady illumination. Against the left wall stood a sturdy iron bed frame fitted with a firm mattress wrapped in clean, freshly ironed cotton sheets. Opposite the bed was a long wooden writing desk with 2 drawers, a high wooden chair, and a neat bookshelf holding dozens of heavy leather-bound ledger books and technical manuals. A side door led straight into a private, clean bathroom, equipped with a porcelain wash basin and a tall plastic water storage drum. "This is your private room," Dare said softly, placing her canvas bag gently on the chair. "The lock on the inside of the door works properly. Nobody enters this room without your explicit permission. That includes me." Amara stared at the bed, then turned to look at Dare in confusion. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Ogre Dare, I do not understand this. My mother sold my freedom to clear $14,500. Chief Kola told the whole market that I was coming here to work off an unpayable debt, like a maid. Why are you treating me like a guest in a hotel?" Dare leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his blue work jacket. His eyes remained calm and deeply serious. "Your mother did not sell you, Amara," Dare said in a low, grounding voice. "Because a human being is not a sack of cocoa or a crate of palm oil. She signed a piece of paper built on greed and fear, but paper cannot change your value before God. You owe me nothing personally, not a single hour of servitude, not a single drop of humiliation." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small steel key ring holding 3 brass keys. He placed them carefully on the wooden writing desk beside her bag. "This room is yours for as long as you need a safe roof over your head," Dare continued. "If you want to leave tomorrow morning and take a bus to your relative's house in the city, the gate will be open and no one will chase you. But if you choose to stay, I will offer you a real position here. You are an educated woman with a university diploma in administration. Look at those ledgers on the shelf. My workshop has grown faster than my ability to keep accurate financial records. I need an honest, intelligent person to organize my accounts, manage parts inventories, and audit our equipment lease contracts." Amara stood frozen, her eyes wide as she listened to his words. The heavy weight that had been pressing down on her chest since morning suddenly felt lighter, as if a tight iron band had snapped open. She looked at the keys lying on the smooth wood of the desk. "What about Chief Kola?" Amara asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "He will come back with his bailiffs. He will demand his cash or try to lock your gates." Dare gave a slight, confident nod, a subtle smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Let him come," Dare said quietly. "Chief Kola knows how to intimidate desperate mothers with fake authority, but he does not know how the law handles illegal debt traps. Sleep well, Amara. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning, we begin work." Dare stepped out into the night and pulled the heavy timber door shut behind him. Amara heard the soft click of the lock as she turned the key from the inside. She walked slowly to the bed, sat down on the clean sheets, and covered her face with her hands. For the first time in many weeks, she did not weep tears of terror. She wept tears of profound, overwhelming relief. The next morning at exactly 7:45, the warm morning sun cast bright beams through the glass window panes. Amara washed her face with cold water, tied her headscarf tightly, and unlocked her door. She walked out into the wide courtyard, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Dare was already at work near the central assembly bay. He wore his clean blue overalls. Standing next to a long wooden workbench, covered with metal calipers, digital voltmeters, and precise blueprint drawings. He did not ask her to sweep the yard or fetch him tea. Instead, he pulled out the wooden chair behind the head administrative desk and gestured toward 4 thick canvas ledger binders stacked neatly in the corner. "Amara," Dare said as he picked up a pair of brass calipers. "Welcome to your official desk. These are the records of every loan, lease, and transaction. This workshop has conducted over the last 3 years. Your first task is to examine every single page. The following morning, Amara began with the original contract. Sunlight lay across the administrative desk, and the workshop had already come alive outside. Spanners clicked, an engine turned over, and one apprentice called for a socket size. Amara read each clause, marked every payment Bisi had made, and created a separate list of assets Kola had taken. She did not pretend to be a lawyer. She did what a good records officer does. She separated facts from threats. After 2 hours, she carried the file to Dare. "Ogadare, this document has 3 different problems," she said. First, Chief Kola did not show any license to operate as a moneylender. Second, he took Mama's van without a court order and still failed to credit its value. Third, he wrote that a family member could be used to clear debt. That last clause attacks a person's liberty and dignity. No signature can turn another human being into collateral. Dare set down the steel pencil in his hand. "Can the whole agreement be cancelled?" he asked. "Or will a court still require the principal to be paid?" "That is for Barrister Okonkwo to advise," Amara replied. "But the accounting is already clear. Mama received $14,500. She paid $3,200. Chief Kola took a van worth $9,800. Even before anybody discusses interest, he has already received value of $13,000. The principal balance is $1,500. His paper says we owe many times the original loan because he keeps adding 45% every month. That is not honest accounting." Dare studied the figures for a moment. He had signed the assumption agreement because Amara needed immediate protection, not because he believed every line Kola had written. "Then we will not fight him with insults," he said. "We will establish what was received, what was repaid, and what he took. Barrister Okonkwo can place the legal questions before a judge." Amara turned to the labor clause again. The words made her jaw tighten. "Mama offered me because she believed his contract gave him power. It did not, but fear can make an unlawful threat feel real." "That is why I signed," Dare said. "A court can strike down bad clauses later. On that night, you needed a door that would close between you and his men." He did not describe himself as a savior. He simply returned the file to her. "Build the chronology. Dates, payments, witnesses. The van, every message he sent. Facts first." Amara opened a new ledger and wrote March 14th at the top of the first page. Under it, she listed the cash Bisi received. The next entries recorded the 3 payments, the seizure of the van on May 3rd, the names of 2 neighbors who witnessed it, and the agreement Dare signed on May 8th. By lunchtime, the story that had existed as gossip and fear had become a sequence that another person could verify. Barrister Okonkwo arrived that evening. He read the contract, asked Amara to explain her figures, and then telephoned a licensed accountant in Akure. "Do not build this case on imaginary legal caps or market rumors," he warned them. "We will prove that Kola's business is unlicensed, that his self-help seizure was unlawful, that the coercive service clause cannot stand, and that he failed to credit payments and property already taken. We will also tender the remaining principal with a reasonable interest calculation, so nobody can say you came to escape an honest debt." He also gave Amara a harder task. Kola had trapped other traders in the same manner, but many were afraid to speak. Over the following months, Amara would have to collect copies of receipts, seizure notices, voice messages, and sworn statements. A single bad loan could be dismissed as a dispute. A repeated method across many households would reveal a business built on intimidation. "Why did you take this risk for me?" Amara asked Dare after the lawyer left. You could lose your workshop if the court process goes badly. Dare looked through the open doorway at the machines lined beneath the security lights. My mother once lost her grinding mill to a lender who arrived with boys and a handwritten paper, he said. She believed she had no right to resist. By the time a lawyer explained the truth, the mill had been sold. I was 19. I promised myself that if I ever had the means to stop the same thing happening to another family, I would not look away. That was the first time Amara saw pain beneath Dare's discipline. He was not fearless. He simply refused to let an old wound decide his behavior. She closed the ledger and said, "Then we will make the record strong enough that fear cannot erase it." For the rest of that week, Amara worked through invoices and bank slips. She called the mechanic who had serviced Bisi's van, obtained a written valuation, and requested certified copies of the delivery records. Dare continued repairing machinery and paid her a proper salary from the first day. There was no master and servant arrangement. Her employment letter stated her hours, responsibilities, leave, and right to terminate the job. The work did more than prepare a case. It returned order to a life that had been reduced to one humiliating bargain. Each correct entry reminded Amara that her mind still belonged to her. Each receipt proved that Kola's voice was not the same thing as truth. The months that followed would change both the workshop and the people inside it. Amara reorganized inventory, introduced numbered job cards, and created separate accounts for equipment leases and repairs. Dare listened when she challenged a figure. He corrected her when she misunderstood a machine. Respect grew in the ordinary space between those moments. During the first weeks, Amara continued to call Dar Oga and kept a careful distance. He never asked her to stop. He understood that safety had to be experienced before it could be believed. She ate with the other workers, received a payslip, and locked her room every night. When she made a mistake in the inventory, Dare corrected the record without turning the error into a judgment on her intelligence. When he misquoted the cost of a bearing, she corrected him in front of the supplier, and he thanked her instead of protecting his pride. By June, the workshop ran differently. Parts no longer disappeared beneath unlabeled benches. Cooperative payments were reconciled every Friday. Amara introduced numbered job cards, separate cash books for repairs and leases, and a rule that no apprentice could collect money without issuing a receipt. Within 2 months, the new system exposed small leakages that had been draining the business for years. Dare did not pretend the improvements were his idea. At the workers' meeting, he told everyone that Amara's records had saved enough money to cover 2 apprentice salaries. Kola sent his first formal demand in July. The letter claimed that the balance had risen above $60,000 and warned that Dare's workshop would be seized within 7 days. Barrister Okonkwo replied with a request for Kola's lending license, a complete statement of account, proof of every credit applied, and the legal basis for the labor clause. Kola answered none of those questions. Instead, 2 men came to the workshop gate at dusk and told an apprentice that accidents happened to people who challenged powerful men. Dare wanted to send Amara to stay with relatives in Akure until the matter settled. She refused. "Hope no problem, Oga Dare," she said. "But this case began because people made decisions about my life without asking me. Do not protect me by repeating the same mistake." They compromised. A night guard was hired, exterior lights were repaired, and every threat was recorded in a logbook. Amara kept a copy outside the compound, so the evidence could not disappear with one broken cabinet. In August, Barrister Okonkwo asked whether other borrowers had experienced similar treatment. Amara began quietly. She visited traders after closing time, sat in back rooms away from market gossip, and listened without promising victory. A seamstress showed her a receipt for money paid after Kola's men had already taken 2 industrial sewing machines. A palm oil widow produced voice notes in which an agent threatened to carry away her roof sheets. A motorcycle parts dealer had signed a blank page because he could not read English well and had been too ashamed to ask for help. Many refused to make statements. One woman begged Amara to leave before her husband returned, because he believed speaking against Kola would bring police trouble to the family. Another admitted that Kola had taken her freezer but would not sign anything. Fear had become part of the business model. Kola did not need every clause to be enforceable. He needed borrowers to believe resistance would cost more than surrender. Mama Ejiro changed the direction of the investigation. She had watched Kola's men remove a grain mill from a widow's compound the previous year. When Amara explained why witness accounts mattered, the 72-year-old cooperative leader called a meeting beneath a church mango tree. She did not ask who was brave. She asked who had receipts. By sunset, 6 women had placed documents on the table. 3 agreed to swear statements in the lawyer's office. Kola responded by attacking Dare's business. An anonymous complaint accused the workshop of selling unsafe machinery without inspection. 2 council officers arrived with a closure notice that carried no file number. Amara asked them to wait while she telephoned the department named on the paper. The department had issued no notice. One officer left immediately. The other muttered that a woman in overalls was becoming too bold. Amara wrote down his name, the vehicle registration, and the exact time he entered the compound. The incident frightened her more than she admitted. That night, she sat in the office after everyone had gone, staring at the same page for nearly an hour. Dare brought tea and did not tell her to be strong. He sat across from her until she spoke. "I thought education would make me less afraid," she said. "But every time his men come, I remember Mama offering me in that room. My body reacts before my mind can catch up." Dare told her fear was not evidence of weakness. He described how his mother's grinding mill had been taken when he was 19, and how, for years afterward, the sound of a tow chain outside a gate made his stomach tighten. "I built machines because I wanted control over things I could understand," he said. Metal tells you why it failed. People hide the broken part. Amara laughed for the first time that evening, and the fear in the room loosened enough for both of them to breathe. Their affection did not arrive through one dramatic rescue. It grew during ordinary work. Rain trapped them beneath the workshop porch, and they argued about whether a cooperative should receive another extension. Amara believed compassion without records would eventually ruin the fund. Dare believed a rigid schedule could punish farmers for weather they did not control. They designed a hardship review together. Neither won. The system improved. Amara also discovered that Dare's restraint was not a performance reserved for her. He knocked before entering every office, paid workers before purchasing new equipment, and apologized when his temper rose during a failed engine test. He did not turn kindness into theater. That steadiness mattered more to her than the growing figures she later found in his ledgers. By September, the lawyer had 10 sworn statements, 4 vehicle valuations, copies of seized property photographs, and a folder of threatening messages. A licensed accountant reconstructed Kola's method from the available records. The figures differed from borrower to borrower, but the pattern remained the same. High monthly charges, concealed credits, self-help seizures, and threats that sounded official to people unfamiliar with court procedure. Kola tried one last private approach. He waited outside Amara's council office and offered to cancel the dispute if she left Dare, and came to his house willingly. He spoke softly, as though the months of threats had been a misunderstanding. Amara switched on the recorder in her handbag. Then she told him, "I am not an account to be transferred between men. Speak to my lawyer." When Kola reached for her wrist, a council driver stepped from the gatehouse and called her name. Kola released her and drove away. The recording did not prove every allegation, but it captured enough to support the pattern of intimidation. More importantly, Amara listened to her own voice afterward and heard no pleading in it. She had not become fearless. She had learned that fear could stand beside a decision without controlling it. In October, Dare asked her to walk with him after the evening shift. They stopped beside a half-finished solar dryer under the mahogany trees. He did not kneel, gather workers, or arrange music. He placed a plain ring on top of her closed ledger. "I love the woman you are," he said. "Not the debt I stepped into, and not the person I imagined I was rescuing. If you say no, your room, salary, and authority here remain unchanged." Amara asked for 3 days. She spoke to Barrister Okonkwo, Mama Ejiro, and one friend from the council. She examined her own gratitude as carefully as she had examined Kola's account. On the 3rd evening, she returned the ring to Dare, then held out her left hand. "I am saying yes because I can also say no," she told him. "That is the only yes I will give." Bisi refused to bless the engagement. She told neighbors that her daughter was wasting education on a mechanic and claimed Dare had trapped Amara by paying her debt. Kola encouraged the story. He announced that the final settlement date would be November 21st. The morning Pastor Stephen planned to join them. He wanted a full church when Dare failed. The cruelty was deliberate. A private demand would collect money. A public failure would restore Kola's fear. Pastor Stephen offered to move the wedding. Amara declined. "If we change the date because he shouts," she said, "he will believe he still owns the calendar of my life." Barrister Okonkwo agreed that the civil matter could be addressed before the vows, if the documents were already filed. And the church did not pretend to replace the court. The preparation became more exact from that day forward. 6 months passed. By Thursday afternoon, November 16th, the harmattan had begun to dry the edges of the road, and the wedding at St. Jude's was 5 days away. Amara stood on the administrative porch with a clipboard, checking a shipment of diesel injectors. She wore dark blue overalls over a cotton blouse, and the men in the yard now came to her before removing a single item from inventory. Suddenly, the quiet afternoon was shattered by the loud roaring of a high-horsepower engine. A massive black sports utility vehicle turned sharply off Market Road, kicking up a tall cloud of red dust as it smashed through the workshop entrance gate. The heavy vehicle ground to a halt right in the middle of the gravel yard, blocking the lane where 3 local farmers were waiting for their cassava processing machines. The driver door opened, and Chief Kola stepped out onto the dust, wearing a heavy maroon agbada embroidered with gold thread. Beside him, the passenger door flew open, and Mama Bisi stepped down, her high yellow lace jail tilting proudly as she wiped dust from her silk wrap with a scented handkerchief. "Look at this place!" Mama Bisi screamed at the top of her lungs, pointing her long fingernails at the surrounding machinery. "Look at where my daughter is living. The whole market is talking about my shame." Bisi marched straight toward the porch, her high-heeled shoes sinking into the loose gravel. She stopped 3 feet from Amara, her face contorted in exaggerated horror as she looked down at Amara's blue overalls. "Look at you!" Bisi shouted, her voice carrying across the entire compound so every farmer and mechanic could hear. "Look at how an ordinary grease monkey has turned my educated daughter into a garage laborer. Is this what I paid school fees for?" For you to wear blue rags and smell of diesel oil. Amara did not drop her clipboard. She stood her ground, her back straight and her shoulders relaxed, looking at her mother with sorrow. "Mama," Amara said softly but clearly, "I am earning an honest living. I am using my brain to manage a real business. There is no shame in working with clean hands." "Shame?" Bisi spat on the dirt, clapping her hands together twice in utter outrage. "You talk about clean hands while living in a mechanic shed? Look at Chief Kola. Look at real success. Chief Kola has 5 luxury houses in the city. He has 3 imported cars. He came to offer you a life of luxury in his mansion, but you chose to follow a pauper into the dust." Chief Kola approached, with his silver-topped walking stick tapping the concrete. "Let her enjoy the smell of grease," he told Bisi. "In less than 5 days, Tuesday morning will come. Your mechanic must settle the account before Pastor Stephen joins their hands. If he fails, I will move against the workshop and the farm." He turned to Amara. "Do not mistake a wedding dress for freedom. Paper is still paper." Kola pulled a folded copy of the loan document from his inner pocket and waved it in the air like a flag. "And let me remind you both of Clause 7, Kola barked, his eyes narrowing into thin slits. "If that grease monkey fails to bring every single dollar, I will not only seal this workshop compound and sell his rusty tools at auction. I will march my enforcement officers straight onto your ancestral farm in the village, Mama Bisi. I will seize every acre of land and throw your belongings into the gutter." Mama Bisi's face suddenly went pale. The proud, arrogant look on her face melted away into terror. "What?" Bisi stammered, stepping back and clutching her chest. "Chief Kola, what are you saying? You said the farm was safe. You said you only wanted the debt paid." Chief Kola let out a harsh, booming laugh that echoed off the zinc roofs of the workshop bays. "You foolish woman!" Kola barked, stepping closer to Bisi and towering over her. "Did you think I gave you $14,500 out of the goodness of my heart? You signed Clause 7. You defaulted on your loan. If your mechanic cannot pay, your farm belongs to me. You will become a tenant on your own father's soil." Bisi lost the color in her face. Her hands trembled violently as she looked from Kola to the legal document in his hand. She realized, too late, that the man she had praised as a wealthy savior was actually a ruthless predator who had planned to strip her family of everything they owned from the very beginning. Amara took a step forward, placing herself directly between her mother and Chief Kola's towering figure. Her eyes were sharp and fearless as she looked Chief Kola in the eye. "You talk very loudly when you hold a piece of paper," Chief Kola, Amara said in a cool, level voice. "But paper built on illegal interest rates and fraudulent clauses is nothing more than trash. You think you own this town because people are afraid of your money, but truth does not bow to arrogance." Chief Kola raised his walking stick in anger, his face turning dark with rage. "You insolent girl," Kola roared. "How dare you talk to me about law? I am the law in this district." From under the massive chassis of a nearby tractor, a slow, steady, clinking sound stopped. Dare rolled out from beneath the machine on a low wooden creeper, holding a heavy torque wrench in his hand. He stood up smoothly, wiped his greased hands on a clean cotton rag, and walked over to the porch. He stood beside Amara, his presence solid and unwavering. "Save your shouting for Tuesday," Dare said. "We will be at St. Jude's at 10:30. The remaining principal, the property you took, and every threat you made will be placed before witnesses. Then Pastor Stephen will continue the wedding." Chief Kola glared at Dare, his jaw clenching tightly. "We shall see, grease monkey!" Kola spat, turning sharply on his heel. "We shall see who leaves that church with their head held high." Kola grabbed Bisi by her arm and dragged her toward the waiting SUV. Bisi looked back at Amara with terrified, hollow eyes. But Amara remained standing beside Dare, her posture unyielding as the heavy black vehicle roared out of the compound. The dark dust from Chief Kola's departing vehicle slowly settled over the gravel yard, leaving an uneasy silence in the afternoon heat. Mechanics in blue overalls went back to their tools, their iron hammers striking anvil steel with sharp, rhythmic rings. Amara stood on the concrete porch for a long moment, watching the road where her mother had disappeared, with a man who sought to ruin their family. She felt no fear now, only a clear, burning resolve to see truth triumph over arrogance. She turned around, walked back into the quiet office, and sat down at the heavy teak desk. The solar-powered wall clock ticked softly, marking 3:15 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. Amara opened the thick, leather-bound master ledger that contained the complete financial history of Dare's mechanical enterprise. For months, Mama Bisi had told everyone in the market square that Dare was a destitute pauper who survived on hand-to-mouth repair jobs. But as Amara flipped through the hand-inked ledger pages, a completely different reality unfolded before her eyes. The ledger entries were written in neat, precise colossums, dating back over 7 full years. There were no messy ink blots, no missing invoice numbers, and 0 outstanding bank debts. Amara ran her fingers down the monthly summary sheets for the previous year. She discovered that Dare's workshop was not a simple roadside repair shed, but the primary technical engine for 3 entire agricultural local government districts. Over 114 smallholder farmer cooperatives relied on Dare's custom-engineered diesel processing equipment. Every month, small farm clusters paid modest equipment leasing fees for cassava graters, palm kernel crackers, and solar-powered crop dryers. The leasing fees were kept deliberately low, charging only $32 per month per cooperative to ensure that even the poorest female farmers could process their harvest without taking expensive commercial loans. Amara picked up her solar calculator, her fingers flying across the keys as she audited the cash flow receipts. The workshop generated a steady, clean monthly revenue of $8,700 from equipment leasing and industrial engine repairs alone. Operating expenses, spare parts procurement, and worker salaries consumed $4,200, leaving a clean net operating surplus of over $4,500 every single month. Amara leaned back in her high wooden chair, her mind processing the incredible truth. Dare was making over $54,000 in pure, debt-free profit every year. Yet he wore simple blue cotton work clothes, drove a reliable 1998 pickup truck with faded paint, and lived in a modest brick room behind his workshop. He did not spend his earnings on golden wristwatches, imported lace agbadas, or loud street parties like Chief Kola. Instead, the ledgers showed that Dare quietly reinvested 90% of his surplus into purchasing raw steel plates, importing high-grade Japanese bearing assemblies, and funding a local educational trust for young mechanics. The office door opened with a soft creak, and Dare stepped inside, carrying 2 cold glass bottles of ginger tea. He placed one bottle on her desk and sat down in the wooden chair across from her, wiping his hands with a clean cloth. "You look very serious, Amara," Dare said, with a light, warm smile. "Did you find a mistake in my arithmetic?" Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with respect and utter amazement. "Oga Dare," she said, her voice rich with admiration. "My mother called you a pauper in front of the whole town. Chief Kola laughed at your clothes and called you an ordinary grease monkey. But you are running one of the most profitable, highly organized, and ethical mechanical enterprises in this entire region. You have over $37,000 resting safely in your reserve account, free of bank debt. Why did you let them insult you? Why did you never boast about your wealth? Dare took a slow sip of his tea, looking out the window at two young apprentices setting up a solar panel framework. Real wealth is not a loud noise you make in the market square to frighten poor people, Amara, Dare said softly. True value is quiet. It is found in the machinery that feeds a village, the young boys who learn a trade, and the integrity you keep when nobody is looking. Chief Kola wears gold rings built on the tears of cheated widows. That is not wealth. That is a golden cage of greed. Dare placed the audit file between them. Barrister Okonkwo called, he said. The accountant has certified your chronology. What remains after the payments and van credit? Amara opened the report. The numbers were plain enough for anyone in the church to follow. Bisi had received $14,500. Her 3 payments totaled $3,200. The delivery van Kola seized had been independently valued at $9,800. That left $1,500 of principal. The accountant added $680 as a conservative allowance for simple interest and documented costs, Amara said. Not because Kola's 45% monthly charge is valid. It is not. The amount is being offered so the court can see that we are not trying to avoid the real obligation. Barrister Okonkwo has prepared a bank draft for $2,180. She turned to the next page. The claim for the van seizure, threats, and money already collected beyond lawful value will continue separately. We will not invent a dramatic number and call it justice. The court will decide damages after hearing the evidence. Dare nodded. That distinction mattered to him. Paying what was genuinely due protected their integrity. Challenging what was unlawful protected everyone else. Then the first document in the box will be the certified account and the bank draft, he said. Amara closed the file. For the first time since May, Chief Kola's figures no longer frightened her. They were only claims, and claims could be tested. What remained dangerous was the influence he exercised through men, money, and public shame. That was why the case needed more than arithmetic. Friday morning broke across Okitipupa with a pale golden light that warmed the metal roofs of the workshop compound. By 7:30 a.m., the air was already alive, with the steady hum of electric grinders and the rhythmic clinking of spanners against steel bolts. Amara stepped out of her room wearing her clean dark blue overalls, holding a heavy yellow notebook and 2 freshly sharpened pencils. She walked toward the central assembly bay, where Dare was standing next to a long, newly fabricated stainless steel machine mounted on heavy rubber wheels. Good morning, Amara, Dare said, wiping grease from his hands with a clean rag. Today, we step away from the paper ledgers for a few hours. I want you to see how these machines actually create food, money, and independence for the people of this district. Amara walked around the large machine, inspecting its smooth metal hopper, double hydraulic cylinders, and small 3-horsepower diesel engine. What is this unit called? Ogre Dare? She asked, touching the polished steel rim. This is a multi-stage mobile cassava processing unit, Dare explained, his voice filled with quiet passion for his craft. In most rural villages, cassava farmers sell their raw tubers to middlemen for pennies, because raw cassava begins to spoil within 48 hours of being harvested from the soil. The middlemen bring big trucks, buy the fresh roots at rock-bottom prices, and transport them to city factories to make cassava flour and industrial starch. The farmer does 90% of the hard labor, but receives less than 10% of the final profit. Dare picked up a wooden stick and pointed to the inner cutting drum, lined with rows of sharp, laser-cut steel teeth. This machine changes that entire economic balance, Dare continued, turning a hand crank to show her how the internal gears operated. When a farming cooperative leases this unit, they wheel it directly into their farm field on harvest day. The machine grates the raw roots, presses out the water using hydraulic leverage, and produces dry cassava mash in less than 20 minutes. Instead of selling raw tubers for $20 a ton, the women of the cooperative turn those tubers into dried gari flour on site, selling it directly to city markets for over $180 a ton. Amara's eyes grew wide as she processed the economic reality. "You are not just building machines, Dare," she whispered, looking at him with deep admiration. "You are moving the factory to the farm. You are cutting out the middlemen who exploit poor village women." Dare nodded slowly, his eyes shining with quiet conviction. "That is the core of real development, Amara," Dare said softly. "True economic strength is built when local people own the tools of production. When you give a hard-working mother a reliable machine, you give her the power to pay her children's school fees without ever bowing down to predatory loan sharks like Chief Kola." Before Dare could explain the secondary hydraulic press mechanism, a blue open-body truck turned into the workshop driveway, its horn giving two short, friendly beeps. 4 elderly women, wearing traditional patterned wraps and headscarves, stepped down from the vehicle, their faces beaming with bright, broad smiles. The woman leading the group was Mama Ejiro, the 72-year-old president of the Okitipupa Women Farmers Cooperative. "Dare!" Mama Ejiro called out in a loud, joyful voice, spreading her arms wide as she walked toward the assembly bay. "The savior of our fields. May God bless the hands that work in this yard." Dare stepped forward and greeted the elder woman with a slight bow. "Welcome, Mama," Dare said warmly, shaking her hands with genuine respect. "How is the palm oil extraction unit performing in your village?" Mama Ejiro turned to her companions, clapping her hands together twice in delight. "Performed?" she exclaimed, she said, laughing. "Dare, since your boys delivered that solar-assisted oil press 3 months ago, our women no longer stand over hot open fires for 6 hours a day, squeezing palm nuts with their bare feet. We processed 40 drums of pure Grade 1 palm oil last week alone. We sold the entire batch directly to the wholesale distributor in the city." Mama Ejiro reached into her woven cloth bag and pulled out a clean white envelope, placing it gently into Dare's open hands. "Here is our monthly leasing payment of $32. Dare," she said proudly. "We are paying 3 days before the due date, because the machine has brought dignity back to our village." Dare did not put the money in his pocket. He handed the envelope directly to Amara, who stood right beside him with her open ledger book. "Amara," Dare said smoothly, "please issue an official receipt for the Okitipupa Women Cooperative and record their early payment bonus in the ledger." Amara quickly wrote out the official receipt, tearing off the yellow carbon copy and presenting it to Mama Ejiro with a polite, respectful bow. "Thank you very much, Ma," Amara said with a warm smile. "Your account is up to date." Mama Ejiro looked at Amara, inspecting her neat work clothes and her confident, graceful posture. She smiled broadly, patting Amara on her shoulder with a motherly hand. "You are a blessed young woman to work in a place where human dignity is respected," Mama Ejiro said gently. "In this town, we see many rich men who drive big cars but leave a path of damage behind them. But Dare builds up everyone who touches his hand. Keep your head high, my daughter." As the women farmers loaded their refurbished grain huller onto their truck and drove away with cheerful songs, Amara watched them disappear down the dusty road. She turned back to Dare, holding her yellow notebook against her chest. She realized that while her mother had spent years chasing fake prestige among the town's wealthy elite, Dare had been quietly building a business that restored other people's independence. He did not measure his life by the gold rings on his fingers, but by the lives he liberated from poverty through honest engineering and fair trade. Saturday morning arrived with a cool, misty breeze drifting over the perimeter walls of the workshop compound. It was exactly 9:15 a.m. on November 18th, and the early morning sun cast long silver rays across the quiet office desk. Amara sat behind her wooden workspace, holding a silver key that Dare had handed her earlier that morning. He had asked her to organize the heavy steel filing cabinet tucked in the quiet corner of his private study behind the main office. Amara unlocked the heavy steel drawer, expecting to find old receipts for machine replacement parts and diesel fuel vouchers. Instead, as she pulled open the second drawer, her hands rested on 3 thick blue leather binders stamped with the official golden seal of the National Patent and Intellectual Property Registry. Curiosity guided her fingers as she opened the first blue binder. On the top page was an official government certificate bearing the signature of the Registrar of Utility Models. Patent number 742B, issued 6 years ago, named Dare as the sole inventor and owner of a low-cost solar hydro hybrid crop dehydrator. As she turned the pages, she found 2 more patent certificates, one for a modular zero-loss palm oil extraction valve, and another for a low-maintenance cassava press hydraulic core. Amara leaned back against the high wooden chair. She stopped and read the heading twice. These were not simple workshop modifications or local repair tricks. These were registered national utility patents. She flipped to the back of the file and found a stack of official royalty statements from 3 major agricultural equipment manufacturers based in the capital city. The figures on the banking sheets were far larger than she expected. Every 6 months, the manufacturing companies transferred over $22,000 in patent licensing royalties directly into a designated bank account. But as Amara audited the transaction history, she checked the totals twice. Dare had not touched a single dollar of those royalty checks for personal luxury. Instead, the bank records showed that 95% of the incoming patent royalties were automatically routed into the Okitipupa Youth Apprenticeship and Land Trust. The fund quietly paid vocational school tuition for over 40 orphaned young men and women across the district every single year. It also provided microgrants for local farming widows to purchase land without taking high-interest private loans. The study door opened with a soft, steady click, and Dare stepped into the room holding a wooden tray with 2 steaming cups of coffee. He saw the open blue binders on her lap and paused for a second, a gentle, modest smile touching his lips. "I see you have discovered my hidden archives, Amara," Dare said softly, placing the tray gently on the corner of the wooden desk. "Ogre Dare," Amara whispered, holding the patent folder with trembling hands. "You hold 3 national agricultural patents. You earn tens of thousands of dollars in royalties every year from industrial companies. You could be living in a 3-story mansion in Lagos. You could be driving imported European sports cars and wearing fine silk suits every single day. Why do you keep all of this hidden in a dusty filing cabinet, while people in town call you an ordinary pauper?" Dare sat down on the wooden bench opposite her desk, blowing gently on his hot coffee. He looked at the window, where 2 young apprentices were carefully calibrating an engine flywheel. "Because loud wealth creates envy and destruction, Amara," Dare replied in a calm, grounded voice. "When a man spends his life trying to show the world how rich he is, He becomes a slave to public applause. Look at Chief Kola. He wears gold rings to make poor people tremble. He buys expensive cars so he can look down on his neighbors from a high window. But inside his heart, he is empty, driven by an endless hunger for power that forces him to exploit desperate widows and ruin innocent families. Dare reached across the desk and touched the edge of the patent certificate gently. I did not invent these machines to become a local lord. Dare continued softly. God gave me an engineering mind so I could solve real problems for real people. When a smallholder farmer can dry her crops without losing half her harvest to rot, her children eat 3 meals a day. When a young boy off the street learns how to rebuild an engine, he turns away from crime and builds a future. That is real power, Amara. Money is just a tool. It should never become your master. Amara looked at Dare, her eyes glistening with respect. She realized that while Chief Kola possessed millions of dollars, stolen through fear and debt bondage, Dare possessed a kind of authority built on useful work rather than display. Suddenly, a clean white saloon car pulled into the workshop compound, its tires rolling softly over the gravel yard. A tall, distinguished man wearing a dark tailored business suit and carrying a black leather briefcase stepped out of the vehicle. It was Barrister Okonkwo, a senior civil lawyer from the district capital. "Good morning, Ogadare," Barrister Okonkwo called out cheerfully as he walked onto the porch, carrying a black leather briefcase. "Welcome," Councillor Dare said, standing up to shake the attorney's hand without ceremony. "Come inside. Amara has prepared our complete financial dossier for Tuesday morning." Barrister Okonkwo opened his briefcase and arranged the evidence across the desk. There were certified bank slips, the valuation of Bisi's van, copies of threatening voice messages, the assumption agreement, and sworn statements from 17 traders who described the same pattern of inflated charges and property seizures. A licensed accountant had signed the financial schedule. The lawyer had also obtained an interim high court order restraining Kola and his agents from entering the workshop or the family farm until the dispute was heard. He read Amara's chronology without interruption. When he finished, he removed his glasses. "This is careful work," he said. "You did not exaggerate. That is why it will survive questions." Amara felt more relief than pride. "Will the order stop him?" she asked. "It will stop any lawful officer from helping him," Barrister Okonkwo replied. "Kola may still send private men because he has relied on fear for too long. If he does, document it and call the police. The petition concerning the van, threats, and unlicensed lending has already been assigned for investigation. A judge has authorized preservation of the relevant business records so he cannot destroy them." Dare brought out the mahogany box and set it on the table. 3 folders would go inside. The first held the certified account, the bank draft for $2,180, and proof that the amount had also been lodged with the court in case Kola refused it. The second held the interim injunction and the land registry search, showing that Kola had no registered charge over Bisi's farm. The third held the charter of a $50,000 community protection trust funded from Dare's patent royalties. "The trust should not be managed by me alone," Dare said. "Amara will supervise the accounts. 2 cooperative leaders, Pastor Stephen, and an independent accountant will sit on the board. Emergency loans will be interest-free, but every application and repayment must be transparent." Barrister Okonkwo closed the box without sealing the second folder. "The land still belongs to Mama Bisi," he said. "The injunction protects it for now. What happens to the title afterward must be her lawful decision, not ours." While Dare, Amara, and Barrister Okonkwo prepared their filings, Bisi moved through the same town under a different kind of attention. The women who once praised her lace now asked whether Chief Kola truly intended to take the farm. Some asked from concern. Others wanted a fresh story for the market. Bisi discovered that admiration built on display disappears quickly when the display begins to crack. She tried to defend Kola at first. She said a powerful man sometimes had to speak harshly to recover his money. She repeated that Dare had confused Amara with ideas above her station, yet each defense sounded weaker after the van remained missing, after Kola refused to provide an account, and after his agents began visiting the farm without permission. One afternoon, Bisi opened the wardrobe where she kept her finest clothes. The shelves held fabric bought during years when school fees, repairs, and land rates had gone unpaid. She touched a bundle of Swiss lace and remembered the applause it had earned at a women's meeting. The applause had lasted less than 5 minutes. The debt attached to that life had reached into her daughter's future. She still did not go to Amara. Pride rarely falls in one clean movement. It breaks in small places, then tries to rebuild itself. Bisi told herself she would apologize after Dare paid. She told herself a mother should not have to beg her own child. Most of all, she refused to admit that the farm had become more precious to her than Amara's freedom, until Kola arrived with a surveyor on Sunday evening. Sunday evening arrived with a heavy, stifling heat that hung motionless over the town of Okitipupa. It was exactly 6:45 p.m. on November 19th, and the sky turned a dark, bruised purple as shadows lengthened across Mama Bisi's parlor. The ceiling fan turned with a lazy, squeaking rhythm, doing little to cool the air inside the dim room. Bisi sat alone on the edge of her frayed velvet sofa, clutching a cold cup of tea that had remained untouched for over 3 hours. Her house was unnaturally silent. The loud, laughter-filled evenings when her high society friends gathered to discuss gold lace and market gossip were gone. Ever since Chief Kola had openly declared his intention to seize her ancestral farm on Thursday afternoon, word had spread through the town like wildfire. The same women who used to drink her cold soft drinks and dance beside her at Sunday church services now looked the other way when she walked past their market stalls. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp, metallic clatter of heavy steel tools hitting her outer iron gate. Bisi jumped to her feet, her heart leaping into her throat as her hand flew to her chest. She rushed to the parlor window, pulling back the thin lace curtain with a trembling hand. Parked directly across her front yard was Chief Kola's black sports utility vehicle, accompanied by an open-bed pickup truck carrying 5 men. 3 of the men wore heavy black security vests, holding thick wooden batons and iron chains. Beside them stood a lean man in a tan work uniform, holding a tripod, a brass land surveying transit, and a bundle of bright red wooden boundary stakes. Chief Kola stepped out of the black vehicle, his long embroidered lace gown trailing slightly in the red dust. He did not bother to knock on the front door. He motioned with his hand, and 2 of his enforcement men stepped forward, using an iron crowbar to force open the latch on Bisi's side gate, leading straight to her 4-acre ancestral farm plot behind the house. "Stop!" Bisi screamed, bursting through her front door and running into the yard with her bare feet. "What are you doing to my father's land? Get out of my compound." Chief Kola did not even turn to look at her as he adjusted his gold signet ring under the dim yard light. He pointed his silver walking stick toward the tall cocoa trees and oil palms marking the northern border of her property. "Survey the entire 4 acres," Kola commanded the man with the tripod, his voice loud and cold. "Drive the red boundary stakes deep into the soil every 20 meters. I want the site map finalized before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." "Chief Kola!" Bisi cried out, falling to her knees in the red dust right in front of his polished leather shoes. She reached out to grab the hem of his gown, tears streaming down her pale, powder-stained cheeks. "I beg you in the name of God, do not take my father's land. This farm is the only thing my ancestors left for our family. I will find the cash. Give me 3 months." Chief Kola looked down at her with disgust, pulling his lace away from her trembling fingers. He let out a harsh, mocking laugh that made the security men chuckle in the background. 3 months? Kola sneered, tapping his stick against her dirt-stained shoulder. "You have had 8 months, Bisi. You spent your days wearing expensive gels and calling yourself a big woman in the market square while living on my money. On Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m., at St. Jude's Church, I will present the signed title transfer to the parish elders. By 12 noon, my tractors will tear down this parlor and clear those palm trees for my new commercial warehouse." "You are a heartless monster," Bisi sobbed, burying her face in her hands as the surveyor began pounding the first red stake into the ground with a heavy iron mallet. "Remember Clause 7, Bisi," Chief Kola whispered, leaning down until his face was only inches from her ear. "You signed your own destruction because you wanted easy money for fake luxury. Tell your mechanic to bring $14,500 in cash on Tuesday, or start packing your plastic buckets into the gutter." Kola turned his back on her and walked toward his vehicle, his laughter ringing through the damp night air as the trucks drove away, leaving behind the red boundary stakes standing like bloodstains in her farm soil. Bisi lay in the dirt for nearly 20 minutes, weeping until her throat felt dry and raw. For the first time in her life, the crushing weight of her own vanity hit her with terrifying clarity. She had driven away her only daughter. She had insulted the only honest man who had tried to help her, and now she was about to lose her home, her land, and her name. Late that night, under the cover of a moonless sky at 10:45 p.m., Bisi wrapped a dark black shawl over her head and stepped out of her compound. She walked through the dark, deserted side streets of Okitipupa, avoiding Market Road where people might recognize her. Her feet were bruised, her spirit broken, and her pride completely destroyed. She reached the iron gate of Dare's workshop compound. The heavy iron wings were closed, but a soft, warm yellow light shone through the glass windows of the administrative office. Bisi stood outside the gate for 10 long minutes, her hands resting on the cold iron bars. She felt an overwhelming sense of shame that made her knees shake. How could she face the man she had publicly called a grease monkey and a pauper? With a trembling hand, she rattled the brass latch on the gate. Inside the office, Dare and Amara were sitting at the wooden desk, reviewing the final notarized court filings with Barrister Okonkwo's assistant. Hearing the soft rattle at the gate, Dare picked up a solar flashlight and walked slowly across the gravel yard. He pulled back the small viewing slot on the iron gate and looked out. Mama Bisi stood in the dark street, her eyes swollen from crying, her black shawl draped over her trembling shoulders. Dare unlatched the heavy padlock and opened the gate wing. "Mama Bisi," Dare said softly, his voice showing zero anger or malice. "What are you doing out in the dark at this hour of the night?" Bisi dropped to her knees right on the gravel driveway, grabbing Dare's work boots with both hands as fresh tears overflowed her eyes. "Dare!" Bisi sobbed uncontrollably, her voice cracking with pure desperation. "Please, Dare! Chief Kola came to my house tonight. He is marking my father's land with red stakes. He is going to tear down my home on Tuesday. Please, if you have any mercy in your heart, tell me if you have a way to save us. I am sorry for everything I said to you. I am so sorry." Dare did not pull his feet away. He gently reached down, placed his strong hands under her arms, and lifted her off the cold gravel. Dare guided Mama Bisi through the workshop door, his hand resting gently on her shaking shoulder. The warm light from the solar wall lamps flooded the quiet office, illuminating the neat stacks of master ledgers and the clean teak desk where Amara was sitting. Bisi stumbled slightly, her bare feet covered in red farm dust, her eyes swollen and bloodshot from hours of crying. She pulled her dark shawl tighter around her neck, unable to look her daughter in the eye. Amara stood up from her chair immediately. She did not shout, nor did she speak a single bitter word. She walked over to the corner shelf, poured a glass of warm water from a glass pitcher, and handed it to her mother. "Sit down, Mama," Amara said in a soft, steady voice. "Drink some water." Bisi took the glass with hands that trembled so violently that water spilled over her fingers onto her lap. She looked at Amara, taking in her daughter's neat blue overalls, her confident posture, and the calm dignity radiating from her face. Then she looked at the heavy leather binders resting on the desk, filled with official legal stamps and precise numbers. "Amara," Bisi whispered, her voice cracking with deep shame. "Chief Kola is driving red wooden stakes into your grandfather's soil right now. He has 5 armed men with him," he said. "By 12 noon on Tuesday, his heavy tractors will tear down our parlor and clear the entire farm. I have destroyed our home, my daughter. I sold your future for fake luxury, and now we have nowhere left to go." Dare pulled out a high wooden chair and placed it gently behind Bisi, motioning for her to sit. He sat across from her on the corner of the teak desk, his arms crossed loosely over his blue work jacket. "Your father's land is not lost," Dare told Bisi. "Chief Kola has no court order and no registered mortgage over it. Barrister Okonkwo obtained an injunction on Friday. His red stakes are trespass, not ownership." Bisi stared at him. "But I signed Clause 7. Amara placed the contract beside the injunction. "You signed a clause that tried to bypass the court, Mama. A private lender cannot declare himself owner merely because he wrote it on paper. He also cannot use me as payment. The Constitution protects every person from slavery, servitude, and degrading treatment. Barrister Okonkwo will explain the rest in court." "Then why is he still outside my house?" Bisi asked. "Why do his men behave as if nobody can touch them?" "Because people obey him before they ask whether he has authority," Dare said. "That habit is what made him powerful." He placed the patent files in front of her only after she asked how he could afford lawyers, a bank draft, and a trust fund. He did not use the papers to humiliate her. He showed them because she needed to understand that his work clothes had never described the size of his life. Bisi read the certificates, royalty statements, and apprenticeship trust records. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For years she had called Dare poor because he did not decorate himself with his income. The money was real. So were the machines, the scholarships, and the wages paid to people she had never noticed. "I judged you with the same foolish eyes that led me to Chief Kola," she said. "But that is not my worst sin." She turned to Amara. "I offered my own daughter to a man because I was afraid of losing land and ashamed of looking poor. Nothing he did can excuse what I did." Amara did not rush to comfort her. "Are you sorry because he threatened the farm?" she asked. "Or because you treated me as property?" The question remained in the room. Bisi pressed both palms together. "Both frightened me," she said, "but only one revealed the kind of mother I had become. If the farm survives, it should not return to my control as though nothing happened." She removed 2 bracelets from beneath her shawl and placed them on the desk. "Sell these. Add the money to whatever lawful balance remains." Dare pushed them back. "The bank draft is already prepared," he said. Use the jewelry to repair the damage you caused in another way. Barrister Okonkwo's assistant brought out a deed he had prepared as an option, not a demand. Bisi read it line by line. The document transferred the 4-acre farm to Amara, while reserving Bisi a right to live in the house for the rest of her life. It prevented either woman from using the land as security without independent legal advice and the other's written consent. Bisi signed before 2 witnesses. Amara signed her acceptance only after the lawyer explained every clause. No shouting accompanied the moment. A pen moved across paper, and a mother returned control of an inheritance she had placed at risk. Before leaving, Bisi asked Amara for forgiveness. Amara answered honestly, "I forgive you, Mama, but trust will not return in one night. You will have to build it." Bisi nodded. For once, she did not demand an easier answer. Monday was spent on final preparation. The deed was lodged at the land registry. The police received copies of the injunction, and the bank confirmed the draft. Across Okitipapa, Kola's men spread word that the wedding would end in disgrace. Other people carried a different rumor. 17 traders had finally given statements against him. That night, Dare placed the certified account and bank draft in the first folder. The injunction, land search, and Bisi's registered transfer to Amara went into the second. The trust charter filled the third. Amara checked every page before he closed the lid. Neither of them slept much. Not because they doubted the figures, but because law on paper still had to meet power in public. Monday afternoon, Chief Kola sent a message asking Dare to meet him alone at the old produce warehouse near Commercial Avenue. Barrister Okonkwo advised against going without a witness. Dare replied that any proposal could be delivered in writing. An hour later, Kola arrived at the workshop himself. He came without Bisi, and without the crowd he usually carried around him. His agbada was cream rather than gold, and he left the walking stick inside the vehicle. For the first time, Dare saw the calculation beneath the performance. Kola was not confident. He was measuring the cost of losing control. The workshop men continued working. Amara stood in the office doorway, with her phone recording openly. Barrister Okonkwo's assistant sat at the administrative desk. Kola noticed all 3 precautions and smiled as though they offended him. "Dare," he said, "we are both businessmen. There is no need to drag a private matter before villagers who do not understand money. Withdraw the petition. I will cancel every charge against the workshop." "What happens to Bisi's van?" Dare asked. Kola spread his hands. "We can discuss compensation later. And the statements from the other borrowers? Those people are using your name to escape debts they willingly collected." Kola replied, "Give them small money from your patent account, and they will forget this campaign." Amara stepped out of the doorway. "You still believe everybody has a price," she said. Kola looked at her with open irritation. "This conversation is between men." "No," she answered. "The debt was used to threaten my life. The records were prepared in my office. The petition carries my statement. You do not get to remove me from the conversation now because I can answer you." For 1 second, Kola's polite expression vanished. Then he turned back to Dare. "Marry her if you like," he said. "I do not care about the girl. What I care about is my name. Tomorrow you will tell the church that the account has been settled privately. You will remove those traders from your complaint. In return, I will release the van and leave the farm alone." Dare wiped metal dust from his palm before replying. "You are offering to return property you had no right to take, and to stop trespassing on land you do not own. That is not a settlement. That is a confession with conditions." Kola moved closer. "Do not become proud because you have 3 patent papers and 1 lawyer. Men richer than you have disappeared inside court files for 10 years. I can close roads you do not even know exist. The mechanics had stopped pretending not to listen. Dare saw anger move through the bay and raised one hand before anybody stepped forward. He did not want Kola's threat to become the excuse for a fight. Tomorrow, Dare said, the lawful balance will be tendered. The injunction will be read. The investigators will do whatever their evidence permits. I cannot withdraw statements made by other adults, and I cannot hand Amara to you because she does not belong to me. Kola turned toward her. You think this mechanic has made you powerful? No, Amara replied. He gave me room to remember that I already had a voice. There is a difference. The answer unsettled Kola more than shouting would have done. He looked from Amara to the open office, where the copied records were stacked in labeled files. His influence had always depended on keeping each victim alone, with a story nobody else could verify. The workshop had turned those stories into evidence. At the gate, Kola stopped and looked back. Wear your best clothes tomorrow, mechanic, he said. A man should look decent on the day his pride is buried. Dare returned to the machine he had been repairing. His hands were steady only after he picked up the spanner. Amara noticed the delay. Are you afraid? She asked, when Kola's vehicle disappeared. Yes, Dare said. Anybody who says he feels nothing when a powerful man threatens him is either lying or foolish. But fear does not change the documents. Amara saved the recording in 3 places. Barrister Okonkwo added a transcript to the evidence schedule, but warned them not to treat Kola's visit as victory. Tomorrow is not theatre, he said. Speak only to facts already filed. Let him be the person who loses control. That night, the workshop closed early. The wedding clothes hung in separate rooms. The bank draft remained sealed. Amara checked the box once, then again. Dare teased her about the second inspection until she pointed out that he had tested the brass latch 4 times. They laughed quietly, not because the danger had passed, but because neither of them had to face it alone. Tuesday morning, November 21st, arrived bright and dry. By 10:30, St. Jude's was filled beyond its usual capacity. White cloth and green leaves decorated the altar rail. Amara's bouquet rested against her palms, and a simple pair of wedding rings waited beside Pastor Stephen's Bible. The congregation had expected vows, music, and food. Chief Kola had come to turn the ceremony into an example. He stood near the altar in metallic gold lace, his rings catching the sunlight. Mama Bisi stood several feet away in a plain purple wrapper, no longer at his side. Her face showed fear, but it also showed a decision she had not possessed 8 months earlier. Dare wore a clean navy suit over a white shirt, though the small scar across one knuckle and the roughness of his hands still revealed his trade. Amara stood beside him in dark green, her shoulders square. The mahogany box rested on a stool between them. Pastor Stephen raised one hand. We came to witness a marriage, he said. A dispute has been brought into this church against the wishes of the couple. We will hear only what is necessary, and then this wedding will continue. Chief Kola stepped forward before the pastor could say more. There is nothing complicated here, he announced. Bisi received $14,500. Dare accepted the obligation. Today is the deadline. Let him pay, or let everybody see that grease and pride cannot replace money. He pointed his walking stick at the box. Open it. Show us the coins you carved from wood. A murmur passed through the pews. Some people had come because they believed Kola. Others had come because they had borrowed from him and wanted to know whether resistance was possible. Near the back, Mama Ejiro sat with 6 cooperative leaders. Barrister Okonkwo waited beside the choir stall with his briefcase closed. Bisi stepped into the aisle. Do not mock him before he speaks, she said. Her voice shook, but she did not retreat when Kola turned on her. Have you forgotten who protected you? He asked. By noon, my men will be on that farm. You did not protect me, Bisi answered. You fed my vanity because it made me easy to control. I signed foolish papers. I will answer for that. But my daughter is not yours, and neither is the land. Amara moved beside her mother. Months earlier, that position would have felt like surrender. Now it was a choice. Chief Kola, the only thing you can claim today is what a lawful account proves, she said. Kola laughed, but the sound came too quickly. A records clerk wants to teach me finance. Dare lifted the box. No, he said. The records, an independent accountant, and the High Court will do that. We are here to settle what is honestly due. After that, Pastor Stephen will finish what you interrupted. Pastor Stephen looked at Barrister Okonkwo. Counsel, are the documents proper? They are certified copies of filings already lodged with the court, the lawyer replied. Nothing depends on the opinion of this congregation. The church went still. Dare released the brass latch. The lid opened. 3 cream folders lay against the dark green lining. There were no bundles of notes and no jewelry. Kola smiled again, but this time nobody joined him. Dare handed the first folder to Barrister Okonkwo. The lawyer broke the seal and gave Pastor Stephen a copy of the certified account. The original principal was $14,500, he said. Bisi made documented payments of $3,200. On May 3rd, Chief Kola's agents took her delivery van without a court order. An independent valuer placed that vehicle at $9,800. He paused while the figures were shown to the parish elders. Those credits total $13,000. The unpaid principal is $1,500. A further $680 has been allowed for reasonable simple interest and documented costs, without accepting the 45% monthly charge written into Kola's contract. Amara lifted the bank draft from the folder. $2,180, she said. The amount has also been lodged with the High Court. If Chief Kola refuses this draft, the tender still stands. Kola's expression changed. You cannot value my security and deduct it as you please. It was not your security, Barrister Okonkwo replied. There was no repossession order, no registered charge over the vehicle, and no inventory. Your men removed it from a public road. Whether you must return the van or pay damages will be decided in the pending case. Today, its value is credited because you took possession and kept it. The pastor held out the draft. Kola did not take it. One of the church elders accepted it on record and placed it inside a transparent envelope. The refusal made no difference. The remaining debt had been tendered before witnesses and lodged with the court. Barrister Okonkwo turned to the contract. The 45% monthly charge, the automatic land seizure, and the clause demanding personal service from a family member are all being challenged. Chief Kola has produced no valid money-lending license covering these transactions. More importantly, no private agreement can reduce a person to property. Section 34 of the Constitution protects dignity and prohibits slavery and servitude. Amara faced the congregation rather than Kola. For months, Mama and I behaved as if his handwriting were a court judgment. It was not. We still had to pay what was honestly owed. We did not have to obey threats that treated my body and future as collateral. A woman in the third row began to cry. Her sewing machines had been removed by Kola's men the previous year. Another trader raised a folded receipt above her head. The case was no longer one family's shame. 17 sworn statements already sat in Barrister Okonkwo's file, and many more victims were seeing the pattern for the first time. Kola struck his walking stick against the tiles. Even if you have paid the balance, the farm secures my agreement. Dare removed the second folder. Barrister Okonkwo opened it and displayed the interim injunction issued by the High Court. The order restrained Kola, his employees, and anyone acting for him from entering the workshop or the 4-acre farm until the civil case was determined. Your men were served this morning, the lawyer said. The police also received a copy. Any attempt to take possession after service is deliberate contempt and criminal trespass. Kola looked toward Bisi. She pledged the land. Bisi stepped forward. I signed words I did not understand, but I never executed a registered mortgage. And on Sunday night, after you came with survey stakes, I made a lawful decision about my father's land. The lawyer unfolded the registered deed. Bisi had transferred the farm to Amara, reserving only a lifetime right of residence in the family house. The land search attached to the deed showed no registered interest in Kola's name. Outstanding land rates had been cleared from Bisi's remaining jewelry, and a contribution from Dare, all recorded as a family loan that Amara could repay without interest. Pastor Stephen read Amara's name from the deed. A cheer rose, then faded when Amara lifted one hand. This is not a magic trick, she said. My mother chose to return control of what she endangered. The court order, not this church, protects the land while Kola's claim is tested. Kola's grip loosened, the walking stick fell and struck the floor. He stared at Bisi as though betrayal were something only he had the right to feel. You will regret this, he said. I have people in every office. Barrister Okonkwo opened his briefcase. That sentence is one reason investigators sought a warrant. Your office records are under a preservation order. Statements concerning unlawful seizures, threats, assault, and unlicensed lending have been filed by multiple complainants. Dare reached for the final folder. He looked first at the women seated behind Mama Ejiro. Destroying one man's scheme is not enough, he said. Another lender will take his place if honest people have nowhere to go. He placed the trust charter on the altar rail. $50,000 from his patent reserve would establish the Okitipupa Women and Family Protection Trust. It would provide emergency, interest-free loans, legal referrals, and equipment grants. Amara would oversee the accounts. 2 cooperative leaders, Pastor Stephen, Barrister Okonkwo, and an independent accountant would form the first board. Every disbursement would be published in an annual report. No one spoke for several seconds. The gift was not important because it proved Dare was wealthy. It mattered because he had designed it to continue after the excitement of that morning ended. Mama Ejiro rose from her seat. This is how a community defeats a loan shark, she said, not only by shouting when he falls, but by building a door that desperate people can enter before they reach him. Applause rolled through the church. Kola stood in the center aisle, no longer surrounded by respectful silence. The gold on his clothes had not changed. The meaning people gave it had. The rear doors opened. 2 police inspectors entered with officers from the State Criminal Investigation Department. The lead inspector carried a warrant signed the previous evening after investigators reviewed the van seizure, threatening recordings, and statements from several traders. Chief Kola, he said, you are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy, unlawful removal of property, criminal intimidation, assault, and offenses connected to an unlicensed lending operation. These are allegations. You will have the opportunity to answer them through the legal process. Kola looked around for someone to intervene. Do you know who I am? A citizen subject to the same law as everybody here, the inspector replied. Come with us without resistance. The handcuffs closed around Kola's wrists. Nobody needed to invent a conviction before trial. The humiliation came from something simpler. The man who had claimed to be the law was being required to face it. As the officers led him down the aisle, a few traders shouted. Mama Ejiro told them to stop. "Let the court do its work," she said. "We are not becoming the thing we condemn." The church settled. Kola passed through the doors without the applause he had expected when he arrived. Outside, police vehicles were already moving toward his office and the farm. His men pulled out the red stakes under the supervision of officers who had copies of the injunction. The land remained standing exactly where it had always been. Only the fear around it had shifted. Inside St. Jude's, the mahogany box remained open. The bank draft, court order, deed, and trust charter lay where everyone could see them. None was a miracle. Each existed because somebody had read, recorded, questioned, paid, signed, and refused to be silenced. Bisi removed her jailu and held it against her chest. She turned first to Amara, not Dare. "I cannot repair 8 months of harm with one speech," she said. "I offered your life to protect my image. I am asking forgiveness, but I understand that forgiveness does not erase consequences." Amara took her mother's hands. "I have forgiven you," she answered. "Trust will return through what you do after today." Bisi nodded. There was no dramatic collapse at Dare's feet. No demand that the congregation declare her transformed. She stepped back and allowed the wedding to belong to the couple. Pastor Stephen closed the legal folders and returned to his Bible. "We have heard enough about debt," he said. "Now we will speak about covenant freely chosen." The congregation laughed through tears, and the musicians resumed the song they had abandoned nearly an hour earlier. Dare and Amara faced each other. When Pastor Stephen asked whether she came willingly, Amara's answer carried to the last pew. "I do." Dare promised that no kindness he had shown would ever become a claim over her freedom. Amara promised partnership, truth, and the courage to challenge him when he was wrong. Their vows sound less like rescue and more like two adults choosing the same work. They exchanged simple rings. Pastor Stephen blessed the marriage, and the church answered with an amen that lifted into the rafters. Bisi wept, but this time she did not stand at the center. She watched her daughter begin a life that had not been purchased, assigned, or negotiated by anybody else. Outside, food waited beneath canopies beside the church. The celebration was modest by Bisi's former standards, and generous by every useful measure. Farmers brought baskets of produce. Apprentices arranged benches. Women from the cooperatives served rice, stew, and pepper soup. Nobody asked whether Dare's suit was imported. By 2 o'clock, Barrister Okonkwo and Amara had already received the first requests for the Protection Trust. They did not hand out money in the excitement of the wedding. Applicants were given forms, free legal consultations, and dates for proper review. The trust would not become another place where personal favor replaced rules. Bisi volunteered to help organize documents, but Amara assigned her no access to cash. She accepted the boundary without complaint. Repair had begun, not finished. The first person to complete a trust application was not one of Bisi's friends. She was a pepper trader named Sade, whose stall had burned after an electrical fault. Sade had 3 children in school, no insurance, and no collateral acceptable to a bank. Under the old pattern, she would have gone to somebody like Kola before the ashes cooled. Amara scheduled a verification visit, requested her market records, and approved a modest stock replacement loan with the board 2 days later. The trust did not promise free money. Sade received a repayment schedule tied to her average weekly sales and a 3-month grace period. She also attended a short session on record-keeping. 6 months later, she made her first payment early. The amount was small, but Amara pinned the receipt beside the trust charter because it proved dignity and accountability could exist in the same system. Another applicant wanted money to pay a relative's old private debt. Barrister Okonkwo reviewed the papers and discovered that the relative had already paid more than the principal. The trust funded legal advice instead of issuing a new loan. That decision prevented community money from becoming fuel for another predatory account. Bisi learned slowly. On her first week at reception, she told an elderly widow to return with cleaner photocopies. Amara heard the sharpness in her tone and called her aside. "The office exists because desperate people were humiliated," she said. "We do not repeat that humiliation in the name of procedure." Bisi returned to the widow, apologized, and helped her copy the documents properly. At home, forgiveness remained uneven. Some evenings, Amara ate with her mother. On others, she left after 10 minutes because Bisi tried to explain the past instead of listening. Dare did not act as mediator unless asked. He knew reconciliation could not be engineered like a hydraulic press. Pressure applied at the wrong point would damage the very thing they wanted to restore. The marriage also had ordinary difficulties. Amara disliked how Dare carried financial risk without discussing it. Dare struggled to leave the workshop when machines failed. Their first serious argument began over a generator contract and ended with both of them recognizing an older fear. Amara feared hidden obligations, while Dare feared that asking for help would make him powerless. They created a rule that any commitment above a fixed amount required both signatures. The rule entered their business documents before it entered their habits. Those months mattered because a public victory can hide private weakness. The church had cheered when Kola was arrested, but applause could not run a trust, heal a marriage, or rebuild a mother-daughter relationship. Only repeated choices could do that. Okitipupa watched less closely after the excitement faded. The real work began then. 11 months after the wedding, the main courtroom of the Ondo State High Court was filled with former borrowers, cooperative leaders, and reporters. The case had moved through investigation, disclosure, witness testimony, and months of adjournments. Chief Kola sat in the dock, wearing a plain grey shirt. He had pleaded guilty to several counts after his office. Records confirmed payments he had concealed, and seizures carried out without judicial authority. Justice Adebayo reviewed the evidence before delivering sentence. He declared the coercive service clauses unenforceable, ordered the return or compensation of property taken from identified borrowers, and prohibited Kola from engaging in lending after his release without the licenses and supervision required by law. The court also ordered restitution to Bisi for the van, less the credit already applied to her account. For conspiracy, unlawful removal of property, intimidation, and related offenses proved against him. Kola received a 4-year custodial sentence. The judge made one point clear: poverty did not cancel a borrower's rights, and a private creditor did not acquire the powers of a court simply because frightened people obeyed him. Kola lowered his head as officers led him away. The public gallery did not jeer. The long process had stripped the story of its market gossip and reduced it to evidence, responsibility, and consequence. Bisi sat beside Amara and Dare. She wore a locally woven dress and a simple blue scarf. Over the previous year, she had sold most of the jewelry that remained, repaid the family loan used to clear the land rates, and worked 3 mornings a week at the trust's reception desk. She was not allowed to approve applications. Her job was to receive people respectfully, explain the process, and ensure no desperate applicant was mocked. "A year ago, I would have celebrated only because my enemy had fallen," she told Dare outside the courtroom. "Today I am thinking about the women whose machines and shops he took. Justice is not complete because I got my land back." Dare agreed. That is why restitution matters. Punishment closes one door. Repair decides what happens to the people left outside it. The workshop on Market Road had also changed. It was now registered as the Okitipupa Agricultural Engineering and Vocational Institute. 40 trainees studied engine repair, fabrication, solar installation, and equipment accounting. Some were funded by DARE's patent royalties. Others came through cooperative sponsorships. The original repair bays still operated because the institute was expected to earn part of its own income rather than depend entirely on charity. Amara managed the institute and the protection trust from the same administrative building where she had first opened Kola's contract. Numbered files filled new steel cabinets. Every loan showed the amount, purpose, approval record, repayment schedule, and current balance. Quarterly summaries were pinned to a public notice board. Transparency was not decorative. It was the wall that prevented kindness from turning into another private kingdom. Dare spent most mornings in the assembly bay. He taught apprentices how to measure twice before cutting steel, how to record a customer's complaint before opening an engine, and how to admit when a repair had failed. His patent still generated royalties, but the workshop's reputation came from machines that worked after the cameras and speeches were gone. Bisi ran the midday kitchen with 2 cooperative women. She served food, kept receipts, and no longer recoiled when grease marked the edge of a table. Some people called her transformation dramatic. Amara knew it had been built from smaller choices. Arriving on time, accepting limits, apologizing without excuses, and returning the next day to do the same. From her office window, Amara could see her husband correcting a trainee's grip on a torque wrench and her mother carrying bowls toward the dining shed. The scene was not perfect. Families rarely become perfect after one confession. It was better than that. It was honest work in progress. 2 years later, on November 21st, exactly 3 years after the interrupted wedding, the Institute held the graduation of its first advanced cohort. 35 young women qualified as agricultural equipment technicians and farm machinery operators. Navy and gold banners hung across the gate, and the 4-acre cocoa farm supplied part of the food served that day. Amara stood on the platform with the certificates. Dare wore a navy jacket over a plain shirt. In the front row sat cooperative leaders whose farms now used locally maintained presses, hullers, and crop dryers. Several graduates had entered the program through interest-free equipment loans from the trust and had already begun repaying them from real business income. Bisi gave the opening remarks. 3 years ago, I thought expensive lace could protect me from shame, she said. It could not. I nearly destroyed my daughter because I valued appearances more than truth. Skill in your hands, clean records, and respect for the person standing before you. Those are things nobody can fake for long. The first graduate was a 19-year-old woman who had previously worked without pay in a city kitchen. She received a qualification in hydraulic repair and a $500 equipment grant approved through the trust's normal process. When she held up the certificate, the applause came from people who understood what it meant to own a skill no creditor could seize. After the ceremony, Amara and Dare walked to the cocoa farm. The red stakes were gone. In their place stood labeled rows of young trees, a drainage channel, and a solar-assisted dryer built by the graduating class. The land had become more than an inheritance. It was a training site and a source of income recorded in the Institute's accounts. Amara rested her head against Dare's shoulder. On the night I entered your compound, I believed every kindness would eventually demand payment, she said. I kept waiting for you to present another contract. Dare held her hand. And I believed I could solve everything by carrying it alone, he replied. You taught me that protection without partnership can become another form of control. We won because you built the record. The women spoke. The lawyer did his work. And your mother finally accepted responsibility. The wooden box from the wedding sat behind glass in the Institute library. Beneath it, a small card listed what it had contained. An honest account, a lawful payment, a court order, a deed freely signed, and a trust designed to outlive one man's generosity. Visitors often expected a secret fortune. The truth was less magical and more useful. My dear listeners, Okitapupa did not change because a hidden rich man opened a box. It changed because people stopped treating noise as authority. Bisi read what she had once signed blindly. Amara turned fear into records. Borrowers who had suffered alone agreed to speak together. Dare paid what was genuinely due instead of using Kola's wrongdoing as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Chief Kola's gold rings had persuaded people that he could decide who deserved dignity. They were wrong. Wealth can buy vehicles, clothes, and influence. It cannot lawfully buy another person's body, future, or silence. A contract deserves respect only when it also respects the law and the humanity of those who sign it. Dare's overalls never made him poor, just as Bisi's lace never made her secure. The value of his life was visible in work completed properly, wages paid on time, tools placed in other people's hands, and power shared through rules that could be examined. That kind of wealth does not need to insult anyone in order to be seen. So remember this. Do not surrender your rights merely because a powerful person speaks with confidence. Read before you sign. Keep receipts. Ask for legal help early. And never measure a human being by the dust on their shoes. Dignity is not the reward of the rich. It belongs to every person from the beginning.